The rising sun painted streaks of amber across the sky as Airman First Class Emily Hayes straightened the brim of her cap. The air was crisp, carrying the faint salt of the nearby ocean and the distant hum of aircraft engines warming on the tarmac. She had been posted to Gate 4 of Naval Base Coronado for the third week in a row, and to most, it was a forgettable duty. Checking identification badges, waving through convoys, and managing the steady line of vehicles wasn't exactly the stuff of legends. But for Emily, this wasn't just a job, it was her oath in action. The Air Force had taught her that discipline wasn't situational. It was a way of life. If she slouched here, at this gate, she would slouch elsewhere. If she let her standards slip when no one was watching, she would fail when everyone was. So she carried herself as if every ID she checked, every salute she returned, carried the weight of the nation's security. That morning, her boots clicked as she shifted into position. Her stance was rigid, but not robotic. Her eyes sharp, but calm. The line of vehicles was already forming, headlights cutting through the dawn haze. Contractors, junior sailors, Marines, and the occasional officer approached the gate, flashing their credentials. Most didn't notice her beyond the cursory glance. To them, she was just another young airman, standing where dozens had stood before. But Emily noticed everything. She noticed the nervous twitch in a contractor's hand when he passed his ID. She spotted the faint exhaustion in a sailor's eyes after a night shift. She caught the way a lieutenant avoided her gaze, perhaps lost in thought or carrying a burden unspoken. Emily cataloged these details automatically, not out of suspicion, but because vigilance was her duty. Her fellow guards sometimes joked that she acted like a drill sergeant trapped in the body of a 22-year-old airman. But Emily ignored the comments. She knew the truth. Security was never boring. It was the difference between order and chaos, between safety and disaster. The base wasn't just any base. It was home to one of the most elite military units in the world, the U.S. Navy SEALs. Emily was Air Force, yes, but her gate stood as one of the primary checkpoints into a facility that shaped warriors who carried out missions no one would ever hear about. That weight wasn't lost on her. Every vehicle she cleared, every person she allowed entry, was a potential link in the chain of national security. What Emily didn't realize was that her quiet professionalism hadn't gone unnoticed. Captain Jonathan Rhodes, the SEAL commander whose very name carried an aura of respect and fear across the base, had passed through Gate 4 countless times. He was the kind of man whose presence commanded silence the moment he walked into room. Rhodes wasn't one to waste time on small talk or casual observations. His eyes were trained to evaluate, to measure, to separate the ordinary from the exceptional. And every time he drove past the gate, he saw her. He saw the airman who didn't slouch when she thought no one was watching. The one who didn't let her phone distract her, didn't let fatigue soften her posture. Rhodes had seen guards wave cars through, with barely a glance, their attention drifting. But not Emily. She treated every vehicle as if it mattered, every ID check as if it was critical. It reminded him of something his first mentor had told him as a young ensign. If you can't be trusted with the little things, you'll never be trusted with the big ones. Emily embodied that principle without even realizing it. At 0630, the traffic picked up. Emily raised her hand sharply, signaling a vehicle to halt. She leaned toward the driver's side, her eyes scanning the laminated badge. "Morning, petty officer." "Go ahead," she said crisply, handing the ID back. Her voice was firm, never lazy or careless. As the next car rolled forward, Emily shifted her weight slightly, scanning the mirrors, windows, and even the back seat. She never rushed, but she was never slow either. There was a rhythm to it, like a soldier standing watch on the edge of hostile territory. The hours passed. Sunlight crept higher, the air warming, and sweat beaded beneath her uniform collar. Still, Emily's stance didn't falter. She wasn't waiting for recognition. She didn't know there was a commander quietly studying her consistency day after day. All she knew was that if her duty was to guard the gate, then she would guard it with every fiber of discipline she had. Her thoughts wandered briefly as she adjusted her grip on the gate barrier. She remembered her first day of training how her instructors had drilled into her that complacency was the enemy. At the time, it had sounded like a cliché, one of those things shouted in cadence during endless marches. But here, standing at a checkpoint befunneled thousands of people into a high-security base, she understood. Complacency wasn't just a personal flaw. It was a crack in the armor of national defense. She exhaled slowly, centering herself. From behind tinted glass, Captain Rod's SUV approached the line. Emily didn't notice him. To her, it was just another vehicle that required her scrutiny. She stepped forward, hand raised. "Morning, sir. Credentials, please." The window lowered, and Rhodes extended his ID. His eyes flicked to her with the briefest of glances, but his mind catalogued the details again. The firmness in her voice, the steadiness of her eyes. There was no tremor of hesitation, no slack in her bearing. She wasn't performing for anyone. She was simply doing her job perfectly. Emily returned the ID and gave a sharp salute as Rhodes' vehicle passed through. To her, it was routine. To him, it was confirmation. The young airman posted at the gate wasn't ordinary. She was something else, something rare. That night, as Emily walked back to her quarters, she thought nothing of the day. Another shift completed, another dozen. Hours on her feet. She peeled off her boots, her muscles aching, and prepared for another early start tomorrow. She had no idea that whispers had already begun, carried on the tongues of observant guards and staff. The commander's been watching her, but Emily didn't hear them. Not yet, for now, she was just an airman on gate duty. Just another figure in uniform standing in the shadow of a base that housed legends. What she couldn't know was that her quiet consistency had already begun to bend the course of her future. A salute was coming, one that would change everything. Captain Jonathan Rhodes was a man whose name carried a shadow before him. On the base, even whispers of his presence made junior officers straighten their posture, and enlisted men lower their voices. He wasn't the kind of commander who craved attention. He was the type who commanded it without effort. Years of combat deployments had etched lines into his face, and his eyes, gray and unreadable, were the kind that saw through excuses, postures, and false pride. Rhodes had a habit most people never noticed. He watched. Not casually, not distractedly, he watched with intent. A man who had led SEALs into the deadliest corners of the world didn't overlook details. Every twitch, every hesitation, every misplaced glance told him more than words ever could. It was why he had survived so long, why his men trusted him with their lives. And lately, his eyes had settled on a young Air Force airman posted at Gate 4. It had started weeks ago. At first, she was just another face in the blur of daily routines. But over time, Rhodes had noticed the difference. Where other guards leaned on the gate arm, idly scrolling their phones between cars, this one stood sharp. Where others barked greetings lazily, she delivered them crisp and professional, her voice steady as stone. Her name, he eventually learned, from the tag on her chest, was Hayes. Airman First Class Emily Hayes. The first morning he truly noticed her was when his SUV slowed to the gate. She stepped forward, eyes steady, hand raised in the sharp motion of a stop signal. No hesitation. No nervous glance at the insignia on his ID card. "Morning, sir," she said evenly, inspecting it like she would any other. Then, with practiced precision, she handed it back and saluted. It was routine. Yes. But Rhodes recognized something beneath the surface. The way she checked the vehicle interior with one quick sweep of her eyes. The way her posture never softened, even after the barrier lifted. The smallest details told him the most important truth. She took her role seriously when no one else thought it mattered. Discipline in the small things, Rhodes knew, was the foundation of excellence in the big ones. The commander thought back to his first deployment, when his mentor, Master Chief Warren, had drilled it into his head. If a man cuts corners sweeping the barracks, he'll cut corners clearing a room under fire. Don't ignore the little things, Rhodes. They'll save your life. Rhodes had never forgotten. And as he watched Hayes, day after day, he saw that principle living, breathing in her unshakable presence at the gate. The base was full of chatter. SEALs prepping gear. Marines moving supplies. Sailors running drills. Thousands of men and women flowing in and out of Gate 4 each week. But Hayes? She didn't let the noise distract her. She didn't wave through friends or hurry officers who tried to rush her. Everyone received the same sharp inspection, the same steady tone. And Rhodes, quietly, began to slow his approach each morning. Not enough to draw suspicion, but just enough to observe her longer. It wasn't infatuation. Rhodes was far beyond being swayed by appearances or youthful eagerness. What drew his eye was harder to find authenticity. She wasn't performing for recognition. She wasn't angling for promotion. Hayes seemed to operate with a private code, one Rhodes respected deeply. Do it right, every time, because it matters. One morning, he tested her without saying a word. He held his ID card angled slightly, enough that the hologram couldn't be seen. Many guards, desperate to keep traffic flowing, would wave him through without a second thought. But Hayes didn't. She held her ground, brow furrowing slightly. "Sir, could you tilt the card for me?" she asked firmly. Rhodes complied, and she scanned it again before handing it back with the same crisp salute. Her voice didn't waver. Not even for him. That told him more than any dossier or evaluation could. Later that week, Rhodes overheard two sailors joking in the mess hall about the gate guard who acts like she's guarding the White House. They chuckled, dismissive, but Rhodes didn't smile. He leaned back in his chair, sipping his coffee, and thought, that's exactly the kind of person I want watching my flank in a fight. Hayes had no idea her actions had earned the eye of one of the most respected men on base. To her, it was just another day of checking IDs, of holding her shoulders square against the fatigue that wanted to drag them down. But Rhodes saw the spark of someone different, someone worth more than the post she'd been assigned. And in his mind, he began to wonder, what would happen if she were tested? Would she hold? Would she break? Or would she rise? The commander didn't know yet, but he intended to find out. It was a Tuesday morning when the calm of Gate 4 shattered. The line of vehicles moved at its usual rhythm, a tide of contractors, sailors, and Marines rolling through. Emily Hayes stood steady, her right hand raised in practiced signals, her left holding IDs for inspection. The sun glared against the asphalt, and heat shimmered in the air. It was just another shift until the black pickup truck pulled up. The driver, a civilian contractor, leaned out with a scowl already etched across his face. His ID was missing the proper clearance sticker. Emily scanned it twice, eyes narrowing. "Sir, I can't let you through without updated clearance," she said firmly. The man's jaw tightened. "Come on, Airman. I've been through here 12 times. You know me." Emily shook her head. "Regulations require current clearance. You'll need to report to the Visitor Control Center." His voice rose. "Don't play games. I've got work waiting on the other side. Let me through." She stood straighter, her tone never wavering. "Negative, sir." You'll need to resolve this with control. The man's hands tightened on the steering wheel. His voice turned sharp, almost threatening. Do you know who I am? I'll have your stripes for this. Other guards nearby stiffened, glancing toward her. Some might have yielded, intimidated by the aggressive tone. But Emily's expression didn't shift. Her right hand rested calmly near her holster, not threatening, but ready. Her eyes locked on his. Sir, she said evenly, you will not proceed without clearance. Step out of the vehicle, or I'll request backup. There was a tense silence. For a heartbeat, it felt like the air itself stopped moving. Finally, the man muttered a curse, slamming the truck into park. Emily gave a subtle signal, and within moments, 2 patrol officers moved in, handling the situation with practiced ease. The vehicle was pulled aside. The threat was neutralized without escalation. Emily's pulse was steady. She hadn't shouted. She hadn't flinched. She had stood firm. From across the lot, Captain Rhodes watched the entire exchange unfold. He had been walking from a nearby hangar when the shouting began. While others dismissed it as a minor disturbance, Rhodes' eyes narrowed. What he saw in Hayes confirmed his instincts. Composure under fire. Not dramatic heroics. Not reckless bravado. Just calm authority in the face of pressure. It was exactly the kind of steadiness he valued most. As the patrol officers led the frustrated contractor away, Rhodes' gaze lingered on Hayes. She returned to her post without fanfare, as if nothing unusual had happened. No smile of victory, no sigh of relief. Just the same posture, the same steady vigilance. To everyone else, it was a forgettable incident. But to Rhodes, it was the answer to his unspoken question. When tested, she held. That night, in the quiet of his office, Rhodes made a note in his personal journal. He didn't mention names, just a simple line. Potential spotted at gate 4. Calm under pressure. Worth watching. And for Emily Hayes, though she didn't know it yet, her quiet battle at the gate had set in motion the chain of events that would change her career forever. The day started like any other. The sun was just cresting the horizon, painting the Pacific in ribbons of gold. The morning air was cool, still touched by the night's chill. Emily Hayes adjusted her cap and squared her shoulders, her boots planted in the dust beside gate 4. It had been weeks since the incident with the angry contractor, but for Emily, little had changed. She still approached her post with the same unbending discipline, still checked each ID with the same sharp precision. But others hadn't forgotten. Her fellow guards occasionally shot her sideways glances, quiet respect hidden behind joking words. Careful, one muttered once. Hayes will have you written up for breathing wrong. She had ignored it, as always. Recognition, whether ridicule or respect, was irrelevant. All that mattered was the job. That morning, however, something felt heavier in the air. The line of vehicles stretched longer than usual, contractors running late, Marines heading to training, officers streaming in from town. Emily kept her voice steady, moving the line along with unshakable rhythm. Then she saw the black SUV. Tinted windows. Subtle but unmistakable presence. She had seen it countless times before. Captain Jonathan Rhodes, the SEAL commander. Her pulse never quickened. She had checked his ID 100 times, always the same way. She stepped forward, hand raised in a sharp signal to halt. "Morning, sir," she said, voice firm. The window lowered with its familiar electronic hum. Rhodes' hand emerged, holding out his identification card. His eyes, cool and unreadable, met hers briefly. Emily inspected the ID with the same measured care as always. No corners cut, no glance too quick. She tilted it, checked the hologram, matched the photo, and only then handed it back. She snapped to attention, raised her right hand, and saluted crisply. And then everything changed. Rhodes stepped out of the SUV. The air seemed to still as boots touched pavement. Conversations at nearby posts faltered. Emily held her salute. Expression neutral, though her mind flickered in confusion. This was unusual. Commanders didn't exit their vehicles unless something was wrong. But Rhodes didn't speak. Instead, he faced her squarely, his own hand rising in a deliberate, unmistakable gesture. He returned her salute. No more than returned it. He initiated it. The sharp motion cut through the morning light, precise and undeniable. His hand lingered, holding the salute longer than regulation required. His gray eyes didn't waver. For that brief, suspended moment, the base's hierarchy seemed to collapse in on itself. A SEAL commander was saluting an airman first class, and he had done it first. Emily's mind raced, but her body stayed locked in discipline. She didn't lower her salute until Rhodes lowered his. When the commander's hand fell, he gave a subtle nod, one that carried no theatrics, no exaggeration. Just acknowledgement. Then, without another word, he climbed back into his vehicle. The SUV rolled forward, disappearing into the flow of traffic. Silence lingered in his wake. The other guards at the gate stared openly now, their eyes wide. One even mouthed silently, "What just happened?" A corporal shifted on his feet, clearly torn between disbelief and awe. Emily said nothing. She turned back to the next vehicle in line, raised her hand, and gave the same crisp order she had given 1,000 times before. "Credentials, please." But inside, her thoughts churned. Had she imagined it? No, the salute had been real. She replayed the moment in her mind with the sharp clarity of a photograph. The commander's hand rising first. His salute held longer than necessary. His nod. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't accident. It was deliberate. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. Vehicles came and went. IDs flashed and cleared, but the image burned in her mind. Still, her face betrayed nothing. Not when her fellow guards whispered, not when Marines smirked curiously as they passed. She remained the steady sentinel at Gate 4, the one who didn't falter. It wasn't until the end of her shift that the weight of what had happened began to sink in. By the time she reached the barracks, the story was already spreading like wildfire. In the chow hall, voices buzzed. "Did you hear? Rhodes saluted an airman." "No way." "Swear to God, the whole gate saw it." Some dismissed it as exaggeration, the kind of rumor that distorted as it passed. But those who had been there, the guards, the drivers in line, swore it was true. And their eyes, when they spoke of it, carried a kind of awe. Because in the military, traditions mattered. Protocols mattered. And one of the most ironclad traditions was that juniors saluted seniors first. A commander of Rhodes' rank saluting first, especially to someone as junior as Emily Hayes, was unthinkable. But it had happened. That night, Emily lay awake, on her bunk, staring at the ceiling. She thought of her father, a retired sergeant who had once told her, "Respect in uniform is one thing, but respect in action, that's rare." She wondered what he would say if he had seen what happened at Gate 4. Her roommates whispered nearby, trying to coax details from her. She answered only with silence. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know what it meant. All she knew was this. The salute wasn't about her rank. It wasn't about breaking tradition for the sake of it. It was about something else. Something Rhodes had seen in her that she didn't yet understand. For the first time since she had been stationed at Gate 4, Emily felt the ground shift beneath her. She had thought she was invisible, just another airman performing a routine duty. But that salute, sharp, deliberate, undeniable, had pulled her into the spotlight in a way she never expected. Tomorrow, she would return to her post. She would stand the same way, check IDs the same way, carry herself with the same discipline. But now, every person who passed through the gate would look at her differently. And deep inside, though she tried to bury it, Emily knew her path had just changed. Forever. By the time the sun dipped beneath the horizon that evening, the base had already changed. Not in structure, not in its operations, but in the way conversations flowed through its veins. Stories travel fast in military life, faster than official. Memos, faster than orders, faster than truth itself sometimes. But this one didn't need embellishment. It was too shocking to be anything but real. Captain Jonathan Rhodes, the iron-willed SEAL commander, had saluted an airman first class first. And everyone who heard it understood what that meant. Something unusual had happened at Gate 4. The first wave of whispers came from the guards who had stood beside Emily that morning. They had seen the SUV roll up, seen Rhodes step out, and felt their own jaws slacken as the salute unfolded. One corporal described it in the chow hall with wide eyes. It wasn't like he slipped up. It wasn't an accident. He meant it. The listeners leaned forward, disbelief written on their faces. Meant it? The corporal nodded, held it longer than he needed to, like he wanted everyone to see. By nightfall, the mess hall buzzed like a beehive. Marines exchanged skeptical glances. Sailors passed the story like contraband across their tables. Airmen speculated with nervous laughter. Even officers, who normally steered clear of enlisted gossip, spoke in hushed tones. Over coffee. Rhodes doesn't just do things, one lieutenant muttered. If he saluted her first, there's a reason. But what reason? That was the question on everyone's mind. For Emily Hayes, the weight of the attention pressed heavier with each passing hour. She hadn't sought it, hadn't asked for it, and certainly didn't want it. Yet everywhere she walked that evening, eyes followed. At dinner, she sat at the corner of the table with her tray, trying to blend into the background. But the conversations around her didn't allow anonymity. "Hey, Hayes," a sergeant called from across the room, half grinning, half curious. "What's it feel like, getting saluted by the commander?" Emily didn't look up from her food. "It was nothing, just doing my job." "Nothing?" Another voice cut in. "Come on, Hayes. He got out of his car for you. He doesn't even get out for admirals." The table erupted in chuckles, but behind the humor was genuine wonder. Emily only shook her head. "He saluted the uniform," she said finally, voice even. "Not me." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't the whole truth. The salute had been directed at her. The story spread beyond the dining halls. In the barracks, late-night whispers carried through thin walls. "You think she saved his life or something?" "No, man. He wouldn't make it public like that. Must have been respect." "Respect? For gate duty?" In the gyms, between sets of pull-ups and presses, Marines speculated on the meaning. In offices, petty officers debated the breach of protocol. In the hangars, even SEAL candidates training late into the night caught wind of it. One candidate asked his instructor about it directly. "Sir, is it true Rhodes saluted an airman?" First, the instructor, a scarred veteran of deployments far too secret to be spoken aloud, only smirked. If Rhodes saluted first, he saw something worth saluting. "That's all you need to know," the candidate pressed. "But isn't that against tradition?" The instructor's smirk widened. "Kid, Rhodes doesn't care about tradition when it gets in the way of truth. You'll figure that out." For Rhodes himself, the salute was already behind him. He wasn't a man who second-guessed his decisions. He acted, always with purpose, and then moved forward. But he wasn't blind. To the ripples, he knew the base would buzz. He knew rumors would grow. He didn't care. That evening in his office, he signed off on reports with his usual focus, but his mind replayed what he had seen in Emily Hayes over the past weeks. The unshakable discipline, the calm under pressure, the refusal to bend when challenged. All distilled into one undeniable truth. She had earned his respect. Respect wasn't tied to rank, not in Rhodes' world. He'd seen officers crumble under pressure and privates rise to impossible heights. He'd buried men with stars on their shoulders and saluted men with no insignia at all. To him, the salute wasn't about hierarchy. It was about recognition. And Emily Hayes had deserved to be recognized. Still, he knew the fallout would test her. "Let's see how you handle the weight," he murmured to himself, closing the last file on his desk. Back in her barracks, Emily lay awake long after lights out. Her bunk felt too small, her mind too restless. Every word she overheard, every glance she caught, replayed in her head. She wanted to push it away, to retreat into the comfort of routine. But the memory of Rhodes' eyes, steady and deliberate as he held the salute, refused to fade. Why had he done it? Was it a test? A statement? A mistake? The military was built on rules, and she had lived by them since the day she'd put on the uniform. But that salute had broken one of the most sacred rules she knew, and somehow it hadn't felt wrong. It had felt purposeful. She turned on her side, staring at the faint outline of her roommate across the room. The whispers would only grow tomorrow. The stares would only multiply. She could already feel the tide of attention rising, threatening to drown her. And yet, beneath the anxiety, something else stirred. A spark. Not pride, not arrogance, but the quiet realization that maybe, just maybe she wasn't as invisible as she had always believed. Maybe standing tall at Gate 4 mattered more than she had ever imagined. By the next morning, the base was alive with the story. The salute had become legend overnight. Some dismissed it, others swore by it, but all agreed on one thing. Something extraordinary had happened. And at the center of it all, Emily Hayes reported back to Gate 4. Same uniform. Same posture. Same crisp commands. She didn't let her eyes waver. She didn't let her stance slacken. But this time, every person who passed through the gate looked at her differently. Some with curiosity, some with skepticism, some with newfound respect. She ignored them all, because Emily knew one truth that no rumor, no whisper, no legend could change. The only thing that mattered was standing her post with honor. And yet, deep inside, she couldn't deny it. Her life had already begun to shift. The salute had marked her, and the entire base knew it. The buzz hadn't faded. It had been 3 days since Captain Rhodes had saluted Emily Hayes, and the base was still pulsing with rumor. By now, the story had warped into countless variations. Rhodes was making a statement about discipline. Rhodes was mocking the Air Force. Rhodes had lost a bet. Some even whispered, half joking, half wondering, that maybe the commander was signaling she had done something heroic in secret. Emily ignored it all. She held her post at Gate 4 as if nothing had happened. Cars rolled by. IDs were checked. Salutes were exchanged. Her discipline never faltered, even though she felt the stares more acutely with each passing shift. But she knew something was coming. When the master sergeant approached her mid-shift, the look in his eyes confirmed. "It, Airman Hayes," he barked, handing her a folded slip of paper. "Report to Building 1. Immediately." Her pulse ticked faster. Building 1 housed command offices. Nobody summoned a gate guard there unless it was serious. "Yes, Sergeant," she replied crisply. She handed off her post to the relief guard, straightened her uniform, and marched toward the heart of the base. The corridors of Building 1 were colder, quieter than the rest of Coronado, the kind of silence that carried weight. Emily's boots echoed softly against the polished floor as she followed the signs to the commander's office. Each step felt heavier than the last. Finally, she stopped before the door. A brass plate read, "Captain Jonathan Rhodes, Naval Special Warfare Command. She drew a steady breath, lifted her hand, and knocked. "Enter," came the deep voice from inside. Emily stepped in, locking her posture at attention. The office was spare, functional. No clutter, no unnecessary decoration. Just a desk, a few chairs, and a wall lined with framed commendations and photographs of SEAL teams in places she could only imagine. Behind the desk sat Rhodes, posture as rigid as stone, gray eyes lifting from a folder to fix on her. For a long moment, silence hung between them. "Airman Hayes," Rhodes said finally, voice calm but edged with something unreadable. At ease, she shifted her stance, but only slightly. Her hands folded neatly behind her back, shoulders square. She felt like every molecule in the room was watching her. "You know why you're here," Rhodes continued. "No, sir," she answered truthfully. One eyebrow ticked upward. "You don't?" Emily met his gaze, steady. "I was ordered to report, sir." Another silence. Then, unexpectedly, Rhodes. Mouth curved just slightly, not quite a smile, but close. "Direct. I respect that." He leaned back in his chair, studying her as if she were a puzzle he intended to solve. "Tell me something, Airman. How long have you been standing gate for?" 8 months, sir." "In those 8 months, how many times have you cut corners?" Her reply was immediate. "None, sir." His eyes sharpened. "None?" "None." Rhodes' chair creaked slightly as he leaned forward, hands folding on the desk. "You're aware people call you rigid. Overly strict, unyielding." "Yes, sir." "And that doesn't bother you?" Emily paused. "No, sir." "Regulations." "Are regulations. My duty is to enforce them." Rhodes studied her for another beat, and nodded once, slowly. "Good answer." Another silence fell, but this one carried less tension, more curiosity. Emily's heart hammered in her chest, but her face didn't betray it. Finally, Rhodes said, "You're wondering why I saluted you." Her breath hitched, though she fought to keep her voice even. "It crossed my mind, sir." Rhodes' eyes bored into hers. "Because you earned it." The words landed like a hammer. Emily blinked, caught off guard. She had expected a reprimand, maybe a lecture about discipline or drawing attention, but not this. "I don't salute rank," Rhodes continued, his voice steady, deliberate. "I salute respect. And you've earned mine." Emily swallowed, unsure how to respond. Protocol gave her no script for this. Rhodes stood then, moving around the desk until he was standing just a few feet from her. His presence filled the room, not threatening, but commanding in a way it was impossible to ignore. "Do you know what separates good soldiers from great ones, Hayes?" She hesitated. "Discipline, sir?" "Discipline matters," Rhodes acknowledged. "But plenty of men with discipline fall apart under fire. The difference, the real difference, is consistency. Doing the hard thing every single time, even when nobody's watching, even when it doesn't matter. That's what I saw in you." Her throat tightened. "I was only doing my job, sir." Rhodes nodded. "Exactly. And that's why it mattered." He paced once, hands clasped behind his back. "Most people treat gate duty like background noise, a task to survive until they're posted somewhere important. But you treat it like it's the only post on Earth. That's rare." Emily felt heat rise in her chest. Not pride, but something harder to define. She had never expected recognition for simply standing her ground, never thought anyone noticed. "Now," Rhodes said, his voice dropping lower, more serious, "that salute has people talking. They're going to test you. Watch you. Some will try to tear you down because they can't stand to see a junior airman respected that way. Others will put you on a pedestal you didn't ask for. Both are dangerous." Emily straightened instinctively. "Understood, sir." "I don't think you do, yet." Rhodes stopped pacing, facing her directly. pressure changes people. Breaks. Most of them. I need to know it won't break you. Emily's jaw set. It won't, sir. For the first time, Rhodes allowed a genuine smile to ghost across his face. We'll see. He let the silence stretch for a long moment before finally saying, "That'll be all, Airman." She saluted sharply. He returned it, this time in regulation order, she first, him second. But the weight of it lingered. As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her at the door. "Hayes." She turned back. "Don't mistake this for favoritism. I won't protect you. I won't coddle you. You'll stand or fall on your own." Emily nodded firmly. "Wouldn't want it any other way, sir." Their eyes met one last time. Then she stepped out into the hallway, the door closing behind her with a soft click. The silence of Building 1 seemed even heavier on the way out. But this time, Emily's boots didn't feel so heavy. Something had shifted. She still didn't know exactly what Rhodes' recognition meant, or where it would lead. But as she marched back toward the sunlight of Coronado, she knew one thing for certain. Her days of being invisible were over. And she wasn't sure if that terrified her or thrilled her. The days after Emily's meeting with Captain Rhodes carried a strange electricity. She returned to Gate 4 with the same discipline as before, but everything felt different now. The other guards stole glances at her. Marines saluted with sharper precision. Even officers, once dismissive, paused a fraction longer before handing over their IDs. She didn't ask for the attention, didn't welcome it, but she couldn't deny it was there. Still, Emily held fast. Same commands. Same posture. Same vigilance. She thought the hardest part would be enduring the stares, the whispers, the weight of expectation. But she was wrong. The real test was coming, and it would arrive in the form of fire and steel. It was late afternoon when the first alarm sounded. A dull, echoing boom rolled across the base, followed by the shrill wail of sirens. Emily's head snapped toward the horizon. Black smoke twisted upward, thick and menacing, from the direction of the motor pool. "Explosion!" someone shouted over the radio. All units, locked down the perimeter. Emily's training kicked in instantly. She signaled the line of vehicles to halt, her voice cutting through the rising chaos. "All cars stop. Engines off. Stay inside your vehicles." Her fellow guards scrambled, some uncertain, others panicked. Emily's voice steadied them. "You two lock down the inbound lane. Corporal, secure outbound traffic. Nobody moves until cleared." She could feel the adrenaline surging through her veins, but she forced her body into controlled precision. Panic was contagious. So was calm. The radio crackled with urgent updates. Possible secondary devices. Casualties at the motor pool, fire spreading. Emily's eyes scanned the line of vehicles waiting at the gate. Contractors, dependents, Marines all staring wide-eyed at the rising smoke. And then her gaze snagged on something out of place. A white van. It was positioned third in line, its driver hunched low, avoiding her eyes. The van's suspension sagged as if carrying more weight than it should. And most telling of all, the driver had been in line before the explosion, yet hadn't moved a muscle since. Emily's instincts screamed. She moved, swift and deliberate, approaching the van with her weapon hand ready but not raised. "Driver," she barked. "Engine off, hands on the wheel now." The man flinched, glancing toward the smoke as if calculating something. Emily's chest tightened. "Driver," she repeated, louder. "Hands on the wheel." The man's gaze darted left, then right. His foot twitched on the pedal. And then he moved. The van's engine roared to life. "Possible VBIED." Emily shouted, her voice sharp as a blade. "Block the gate." In an instant, chaos erupted. Guards scrambled to position barriers. Emily sprinted forward, weapon drawn, closing the distance. To the van. The driver slammed the vehicle into gear, tires squealing. But he hadn't accounted for Emily Hayes. She pivoted, planting her boots, sights locking on the windshield. Her voice cut through the air like thunder. Stop the vehicle. Now. For a heartbeat, time froze. The driver's eyes met hers through. The glass wild, desperate, calculating. Then he pressed the accelerator. Emily fired. The windshield spider-webbed. The van lurched, swerved, and slammed into the barrier with a metallic scream. Smoke hissed from the engine block as it shuddered to a halt. The driver slumped forward, motionless. Silence hung for half a breath, then the world snapped back. Into motion. Guards rushed forward, pulling civilians back, securing the scene. Explosive ordnance specialists were called in. The perimeter tightened like a noose. Emily lowered her weapon slowly, her breath ragged but controlled. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't waver. She turned to the guards nearest her, barking orders with iron clarity. Check for secondaries. Secure all vehicles. No one in or out until EOD clears this van. Her commands cut through their panic, anchoring them. And for the first time, the younger guards didn't hesitate. They obeyed. Hours later, when the smoke had cleared and the threat was contained, the truth came out. The van had been packed with explosives. Enough to level the gate, maybe more. The explosion at the motor pool had been a diversion, a brutal, calculated distraction to force security into chaos. But Emily Hayes hadn't broken. She had stood her ground. The debrief that night felt surreal. Officers in crisp uniforms asked her to walk through every detail, every observation, every decision. Emily answered calmly, methodically, her voice never faltering. When she was dismissed, she stepped outside into the cool night air. The base was quiet now, the earlier chaos reduced to an echo. And there, waiting by the steps, was Captain Rhodes. He said nothing at first. Just studied her with those piercing gray eyes, arms folded across his chest. The silence stretched long enough for Emily to feel her throat tighten. Finally, Rhodes spoke. His voice was low, steady. You saved lives today. Emily shook her head slightly. Just did my duty? Sir. Rhodes' gaze sharpened. No, you did more. You kept your head when everyone else was losing theirs. You saw what nobody else saw, and you acted. Emily's chest tightened. She wanted to speak, but words felt clumsy, unnecessary. Rhodes stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. That's why I saluted you. Because I knew, when the moment came, you wouldn't break. For a moment, the weight of his words pressed against her like a physical force. And then, as quickly as it came, Rhodes turned away. Get some rest, airman. Tomorrow will be harder. He walked into the darkness, leaving her standing beneath the cold glow of the floodlights, heart pounding. That night, lying in her bunk, Emily stared at the ceiling. She replayed the explosion, the van, the split-second decision to fire. She thought of the faces of the people in line, the lives that would have ended had she hesitated. Her hands finally trembled then, alone in the dark where no one could see. But beneath the trembling was something else, a fierce, unshakable certainty. She had been tested, and she had not broken. The days following the attack passed in a blur of briefings, interviews, and security updates. The base had been shaken to its core, but the lives saved, thanks to Emily Hayes, became a quiet but undeniable legend. Though she had carried out her actions with the same discipline she applied to every ID check, her courage could not remain unnoticed. By the third morning after the incident, whispers had evolved into tangible acknowledgement. Officers who had once ignored her now offered nods of respect. Guards, younger airmen, and even civilians spoke her name with reverence. Emily had never sought attention, yet the ripple of her actions spread wider than she could have imagined. She arrived at Gate 4 just before dawn, slipping into position as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Vehicles lined up, engines idling in the cool morning air, each driver now looking at her with a new awareness. There was no arrogance in their eyes, just acknowledgement. Emily's focus remained unwavering. Each ID she checked, each command she issued, was delivered with the same precision as before. Yet beneath the surface, there was a quiet pride, a deep sense of knowing that her actions mattered far beyond the gate. By mid-morning, a black SUV rolled toward the gate. Emily's hand went up, voice steady. "Credentials, please." V.E. slowed. Rhodes stepped out, but this time, it wasn't a test. There was no silent assessment. Instead, he smiled faintly, a rare expression reserved only for moments that carried meaning. "Airman Hayes," he said as he handed over his ID. Emily's eyes scanned it carefully. Her posture remained straight, her voice calm. "Sir, everything appears to be in order." He returned her salute, this time in regulation, but there was something deeper in the gesture, a shared understanding born of fire, of crisis, and of unshakable professionalism. Rhodes spoke softly, almost confidentially. "You've made a difference here, Hayes, more than you realize." Emily nodded, the words feeling heavier than any metal could convey. "Thank you, sir. I'm just doing my duty." Rhodes inclined, his head once sharply. "And your duty saved lives. That will not be forgotten." Word spread quickly beyond Gate 4. Within hours, Emily Hayes' name was being circulated in official channels. Security officers, SEAL teams, and higher ranking officials had all received reports praising her decisiveness and calm under pressure. In a place where heroism often went unnoticed, Emily's courage was now a shining example. An unexpected call came later that afternoon. Emily was summoned to the base operations center, where a panel of senior officers and commanders had gathered. Her heart beat faster than she expected, but her steps remained steady. She saluted as she entered, her posture flawless, her uniform crisp. The room was quiet. Then, one of the senior officers, an admiral, whose face carried the weight of decades in service, rose. "Airman Hayes," he began, voice firm, "we've reviewed the events of the past days in detail. Your actions at Gate 4 prevented catastrophic loss of life. Your focus, discipline, and courage have set a new standard for all personnel on this base and beyond." Emily stood at attention, blinking rapidly to hold back the surge of emotion. She had never sought recognition, and yet, here it was acknowledgement. Not just of what she had done, but of who she was in action. The Admiral gestured toward Rhodes, who remained standing behind the dais. "Captain Rhodes, would you like to add a few words?" Rhodes stepped forward, voice steady and calm, as always. "Airman Hayes is everything a service member should be. She doesn't act for recognition. She doesn't bend under pressure. And when the moment came, she acted decisively, saving lives in a way most of us only hope to. I saluted her because she earned it, not because of rank, but because of character." The room was silent, the weight of his words filling every corner. Emily's mind replayed the moment, the first time he had saluted her, at the gate, as she realized the depth of its significance. The salute had been a prelude, a quiet acknowledgement of potential, and now that potential had been realized. Later that evening, Emily returned to her quarters, exhausted but awake with adrenaline. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel the impact of what she had accomplished. The weight of responsibility, once so isolating, now felt like a mantle she had earned. Her roommates gathered around, finally daring to ask the questions she had avoided. "Did it feel different?" one whispered. Emily considered her answer carefully. Yes, but it doesn't make me better than anyone else. It just means I stood my post when it counted. Another roommate pressed. Are you proud? Emily paused, staring at the ceiling. I think I am, but not for me. For the people whose lives didn't end because I did my job. That's what matters. She finally allowed herself to sit, her back against the wall, absorbing the gravity of the past week. She had been tested, observed, and recognized. And yet, despite all that, she remained the same airman who had stood at Gate 4 every day. For months steady, disciplined, and focused. Word of Emily's actions spread beyond the base. Local media picked up the story, though details were kept minimal due to security restrictions. Colleagues across branches of the military celebrated her composure and courage. Even within the SEAL community, her name began to carry weight, an airman whose calm decisiveness could save lives, an example of vigilance and discipline in action. But Emily remained grounded. She continued to stand her post, check IDs, and enforce regulations with the same exacting precision. Recognition hadn't changed her, because her commitment had never been about accolades. It had always been about duty. Yet quietly, she began to see a shift in herself. Confidence mingled with resolve. Awareness replaced uncertainty. And in her mind, she understood something vital. Courage wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was quiet, consistent, and visible only to those who watched closely. Rhodes' salute, the crisis, and the acknowledgement had done more than honor her actions. They had revealed a deeper truth about her own potential. She wasn't just a gate guard. She was someone who could carry responsibility under pressure. Someone capable of standing firm when the stakes were highest. And the world, both at Coronado and beyond, was starting to notice. Weeks later, during a formal base ceremony, Emily stood at attention as Captain Rhodes approached. The air was filled with sunlight and the crispness of morning. Rhodes saluted. Her first again, this time in front of the assembled personnel. Every eye on the parade field followed the motion, understanding immediately what it signified. The gesture was no longer secret, no longer whispered about in hallways. It was public. Acknowledgement. Emily Hayes had earned it. She returned the salute with precision, her back straight, eyes forward, and heart steady. Around her, officers, enlisted personnel, and even SEALs nodded in silent respect. Emily understood, at that moment, the full weight of what had begun. At Gate 4, from the ordinary quiet duties she had performed, a legacy of courage and recognition had emerged. One simple act of discipline, performed day after day, had been noticed, tested, and proven. And in the end, it had echoed far beyond the gate she had once believed defined her world. The crowd dispersed. The ceremony concluded. But Emily stood, for a moment longer, absorbing the significance. Her journey from a gate guard to a recognized hero was complete not because of rank, but because of unwavering discipline, courage under pressure, and quiet integrity. And as she walked back toward her post, the name Emily Hayes felt lighter, stronger, and more powerful than ever. She had been tested, she had endured, and she had been recognized. Her story, once confined to Gate 4, would now inspire those who followed in her footsteps. And somewhere, beyond the tarmac and the rising sun, Captain Rhodes smiled, knowing the salute he had offered first had been the right choice after all.